already?
Yep.
Okay, so Rabbi Isai, we're on Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph on the third line, but let's just review what the topic of the Mishnah was from yesterday. The Mishnah had said that we're talking about a situation where a person has accidentally mixed inner blood and outer blood. What do I mean by inner blood and outer blood? There are some karbanos, most karbanos, where the blood work is done on the outer altar. There is a small percentage of karbanos where the blood work is done on the inner altar. So the question is raised in the Mishnah, what happens if that blood is accidentally mixed together of two different karbanos, one where it's inner blood and one where it's outer blood? So the Mishnah says, L'chatchila, everybody agrees that you have to discard and start all over again. But what happens if b'di'evet, you actually use that blood? So then, according to Rabbi Akiva, it depends. If you started and did the blood work outside, and then from that mixed blood, you sprinkled some of that blood on the outer altar, and then you mixed, and then you sprinkled it on the inner altar, so then b'di'evet, it's going to be kosher. However, if you took that blood mixture and you brought it inside first and sprinkled, and then you took it outside and sprinkled on the outer altar, then Rabbi Akiva says it's pasul and the Chachamim say it's kosher. Now the reason why, as we'll see in a moment, why does Rabbi Akiva say it's pasul? Because Rabbi Akiva holds that any blood from any carbon where the blood work was supposed to be done on the outer altar, if that blood is brought into the heichal before the sprinkling is done, that blood becomes pasul, unconditionally, regardless of what kind of carbon it is. It doesn't matter whether it's a chatas or a shlamim, doesn't matter. Blood from a carbon where the blood work was supposed to be done on the outer altar that was brought inside before you had a chance to sprinkle becomes pasul and cannot be used any longer. So the Gemara now says, Shahaya Rabbi Kiva Omer v'chulei. Omer Rav Yehuda Omer Shmuel. So Rav Yehuda Omer Shmuel says, I'm going to explain to you the basis of Rabbi Akiva's shita is based on the psukim themselves. But in order for us to understand the hermeneutics of the pasuk, we have to give the following mashal. Mashal l'maha davar doime, the Talmud shemazak l'rabo b'chamin v'omer lo mizogli, omer lo bameh, omer lo b'chamin anu asukin, Achshav bein b'chamin bein bitzoni. So the following analogy is a little bit difficult, but we'll get through it anyway. The analogy is as follows: a lord says to his vassal, says to his servant, he says, "I'd like a cup of wine diluted with warm water." And the practice back in the ancient times was you would dilute very strong wine with water. But you could request it either warm or cold. You could request warm water or cold water dilution. It doesn't sound very appetizing, but that's the way it was done back in those days. So if the lord says to his vassal, I want you to prepare for me a warm water dilution of wine, and then afterwards the king says, I'd like another cup, please. And then the vassal says, would you like cold water or warm water? The master says to him, why are you even asking that question? If I said I'd like another cup, isn't it self-evident that I want the same thing that I had before? But now that you're asking me, let me specify, and my specification itself will indicate that you can have it, you can do it either way. The fact that I'm specifying that I would like it diluted with water, either warm or cold, is an indication that it can be either warm or cold. If you should have known on your own that without my specification, I just wanted the same thing over again. But the fact that you're requiring me to specify, that in itself is an indication that it can be either warm or cold because it's a departure from the past. Hachanami mechti b'chatas askinan va'asi chatas dekasav rachmana mechti b'chatas askinan va'asi chatas dekasav rachmana lamali elalav chatas ka'amin Allah Ella lav chatos kamin Allah, ella kol kudsh, period. So, what we're looking at is the way that Rabbi Akiva makes the derivation from the psukim. Vayikra Perek Vav is the source for Pasuk Chaf Beis, is the source to tell me that when outer blood is brought inside the heichal, it becomes pasuk. But that pasuk is referring specifically to a korban chatas. Rabbi Akiva's argument is that entire paragraph was talking about a korban chatas. Why was it necessary for this particular pasuk, which says v'chol chatas asher yuva midama el oel moed lechaper b'kodesh lo say ochel ba'esh tisarev? It says that any chatas whose blood is brought into the heichal is no good; it has to be discarded. Why did the Torah have to specify chatas? So it's analogous to that analogy that we provided. The Torah was already talking in general terms about a korban chatas. Why did it have to specify chatas again in this pasuk? To tell me that it means to generalize and broaden the halacha, that it doesn't just apply to a korban chatas, but it applies to all korbanos. Any korban that's blood work was supposed to be done on the outer altar, that's brought inside, that blood becomes pasuk. So maskef la Rav Huna bereider Rav Yoshua mechti israbu kol kodshim legabi mizbeach leinyan marika ushtifa chatas the kasav rachmana lamali shmami no chatas in mida achrina lo. So the Rav Huna bereider Rav Yoshua challenges the whole premise that we've offered to explain Rabbi Akiva. He says there's another Gemara, which we're not going to go into detail now, but that other Gemara says that the whole context of this parsha is not just talking about korban chatas. And even though it is talking about korban chatas, but the Gemara is able to broaden the larger paragraph's context to refer to other korbanos. Vis-a-vis what? Vis-a-vis a different halacha. Vis-a-vis the halacha that after you've used a kli shares for blood, you are obligated to carefully scour and wash out that kli before using it for any other korban. You have to clean it out very carefully before you use it for any other korban, because otherwise there may be remaining blood that could passel the next use. Could be because of blias, it's not clear. But it's marika ushtifa. It doesn't seem like there's blias involved. It seems like it just has to be cleansed very properly. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that Gemara at another point. But the question is, if in another Gemara they're able to say that the context of this entire paragraph is not just the chatas, then it could be that the reason why the Torah specifies chatas in this particular pasuk, talking about bringing outer blood inside, is because it wants to tell you that only a korban chatas, whose blood work was supposed to be done outside and is brought inside, is pasul, but another korban not. So v'halo damya ela letalmid shemazig l'rabo bein b'chamin bein bitzonein amar lo al timzog li ela chamin. And therefore, the analogy has completely changed. It's not analogous to a servant whose master initially specified, I want a warm water diluted wine, but rather his master said, I want a water diluted wine, and it doesn't matter whether it's warm or cold. And then afterwards, the master specifies, for this next cup, I only want it with warm water. And maybe that's what the pasuk means when it says v'chol chatas, that only for a korban chatas do we say that if it was outer blood and it's brought inside is it pasul, but not for other karbanos. So that throws a wrench in your explanation of why Rabbi Akiva holds that all sacrificial blood, regardless of whether it's a chatas or any other karban, if it was outer blood work and it's brought inside, it's pasul. Elataima de Rabbi Akiva mechatas v'chol chatas. So here's the real reason. It's got nothing to do with that mashal that you were trying to give, but rather it's an extra word, v'chol. Because the Torah says not chatas asher yuva midama el ol moed, that a chatas blood that is brought into the ol moed, but rather v'chol chatas, and all chatas. The word v'chol is completely superfluous. Detanya chatas, ainli ela chatas kadshe kadshim minayin tamalamer kol chatas, kadshim kala minayin tamalamer v'chol chatas divrei Rabbi Akiva. And as the Brisa says, that Rabbi Akiva himself is quoted as saying this. Why did the Torah have to say v'chol? So the word kol without the letter vav comes to include not only a korban chatas, but all korbanos that are akin to a chatas because they're kadshe kadshim. And the extra letter vav of v'chol chatas is coming to add not only kadshe kadshim, but also lower level kedusha korbanos like a korban shlamim, kadshim kalim, to tell you that any of their blood that is brought from the outside, from the azara into the heichal, becomes pasul. The Brisa continues. Amar lo Reb Yossi Haglili afila atamar b'kol hayom kulo eini shomei alach. Reb Yossi Haglili is quoted very interesting language. He says, listen, Rabbi Akiva, you can bring me extra words and extra letters the whole day long. I'm not going to listen to you. In other words, I don't agree to your interpretation that this pasuk is telling me that blood from any carbon that is brought inside is pasul. Ela chatas, ainly ela chatas yachid chatas tzibur minayin tamalamar kol chatas. But rather, the way I learn it from the word kol chatas, the extra letter word kol, is coming to tell me that even though the context of this pasuk is talking about an individual's carbon chatas, kol chatas is coming to add and say even a communal carbon chatas is included in this law. Ve'ein li ela chatas zachar chatas nekeva minayin tamalomar vichol. And furthermore, the extra letter vav is coming to tell me that not only a male animal that is used for a carbon chatas, but even a female animal that is used for a carbon chatas. So the Gemara just challenges that's klapi laya. Is that the right direction? Meaning, isn't that counter what I would normally say? Elahachi kamer, because after all, the standard individual carbon chatas is a female animal, is a nekeva. So therefore, really what you meant to say is elahachi kamer, ainli elachatas nekeva chatas zachar minayin tamalamer v'chol chatas. But rather what he meant to say was just the opposite. That all I know from the word chatas is that the standard is a female animal, and maybe only by female animals whose blood is brought from the courtyard into the heichal does the blood become pasul. How do you know that it applies to male animals as well? V'chol chatas. Bottom line is that Rabbi Yossi Haglili takes issue with Rabbi Akiva. He says, I do agree that the pasuk clearly states that when the blood from a chatas is brought inside, it becomes pasul. But I disagree with your desire to extend that to all other karbanos. Only the chatas, and it doesn't matter what kind of chatas, as long as, whether it's male, female, communal, individual, the bottom line is if it was meant for the outer altar and you brought it into the heichal, the blood becomes pasul. But I do not agree that it applies to other karbanos. It does not apply to an asham, it does not apply to a shlomim, etc. So now the Gemara challenges this Brice's understanding of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. V'savar Rabbi Yossi Haglili haikra lahachi huda asa. How could Rabbi Yossi Haglili say that this pasuk is talking about a chatas whose blood work is supposed to be done on the outer altar? V'hatanya Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer kol ha'inyan kulo ein medaber ela beparim hanisrafim l'su'irim hanisrafim lisrof pesuleihem ha'beis habira v'lamod below sasi al achilaso. So there's a totally different brisa which represents Rabbi Yossi Haglili's shita as totally contrary to what we just said. Rabbi Yossi Haglili, according to this brisa, understands this pasuk to be referring to not a standard korban chatas whose blood work is supposed to be done on the outer altar, but rather a special korban chatas for a, let's say, a par helam davar, when the community errs in halacha, or when they accidentally worship avodah zarah. There has to be a communal korban chatas which is different from a standard korban chatas. A standard korban chatas, the blood work is done on the outer altar, and a communal error korban chatas, the blood work is sprinkled on the inner altar. And what this pasuk, according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, is telling us is that, let's say that blood from an inner for an inner chatas becomes pasul for whatever reason. Let's say it becomes tameh, or let's say it was done shelo lishma for whatever reason, and you can't use this blood anymore. In a standard situation, the halacha requires that when blood from an outer altar carbon becomes pasul, you have to incinerate that blood outside the temple, in a special bonfire that's outside the temple. But this pasuk reveals to us that in a special case like ours, where it's an inner blood chatas, you don't remove the blood all the way outside the temple to discard it, but rather you simply take it into the courtyard and incinerate it there. That's what the parsha, the whole context of this parsha is talking about, according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili. And furthermore, it's coming to teach me a secondary halacha about inner blood chatases, that normally the Kohanim eat the meat of a korban chatas, but for an inner blood chatas, the Kohanim do not eat the meat. And that's what the pasuk is saying. Amru lo chatas shenichnas dama lifnai v'lifnim minayin. Amar lahem hein lo huva. So, and then the rabbis turn to Rabbi Yossi Haglili and they say that, how do you know that one second. So how do you know that if blood was brought, how do you know then the halacha that if blood is brought inside when it was supposed to remain outside, how do you know that it's pasul? If you're learning that this parsha is not talking about that, then how do you know that halacha? And Rabbi Yossi Aglili responded to them, I know it from a different pasuk. I know it from the pasuk having to do with the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, where Moshe, after Nadav and Avihu died, turned to Aharon and his two remaining sons, Elazar and Isamar, and he said to them, why have you not eaten the meat of the korban chatas that you're supposed to bring now for the miluim? And he said, Hein lo huva es dama min hakodesh penima. He said, the blood was not illicitly brought inside the heichal. From here you can infer that if the blood had been illicitly brought inside the heichal, then that blood would become pasul, and you would not be allowed to partake of the korban chatas. So therefore, the bottom line is, Rabbi Yossi Haglili understands this whole paragraph and this whole pasuk in Vayikra Perek Vav as not referring to outer blood chatas, but rather is referring to inner blood chatas. So how can the previous brisa say that Rabbi Yossi Haglili holds that it is referring to outer blood chatas? So the Gemara answers, Lidvar of the Rabbi Akiva Ka'amar. You're right. In reality, Rabbi Yossi Haglili himself holds that the pasuk is talking about inner blood chatas. However, blood from an inner chatas. However, in disputing Rabbi Akiva, who wanted to maintain that it's not only referring to the blood from a chatas, but even to blood from other karbanos, Rabbi Yossi Haglili said, even according to your opinion, that the pasuk is talking about an outer blood chatas, I dispute your interpretation, and I say that it's limited to the chatas and does not extend to other animals. So therefore, he was responding to Rabbi Akiva Shita l'shitascha, according to you, but according to me, the pasuk is not talking about an outer blood chatas at all. It's talking about an inner blood chatas. Let's go on to the Mishnah. Next Mishnah: Chata shekibel dama bishnei kosos yatsa echad mehem lachutz hapinimi kosher. So now we're talking about the following case. We have someone shechts the animal, and the next step right after shechita is what we call Kabbalah. And normally you do Kabbalah with one receptacle. But let's say this guy, the Kohen, was an Uber Chacham, and he decided, you know what, there's a lot of blood here. Let me use two receptacles. So he gets 2 liters of blood, or 2 quarter liters of blood out of the animal, one in this kli and one in that kli. And then one of those utensils is taken outside the Beis HaMikdash. The question now is, what is the status of the remaining blood? Is that remaining blood kosher or non-kosher? Can it be used for zrika or not? So the Mishnah says it's still kosher. Just because some blood was taken outside of it, as long as you have some remaining blood that was never taken outside, everything is still kosher. However, nichnas echad mehem lifnim, but let's say you have a korban chatas where the blood was received in 2 receptacles, and instead of taking one receptacle outside, you take that one of those vessels and you bring it inside to the heichal. Now remember, when it comes to a chatas, everyone agrees that the blood of an outer altar chatas that is brought inside the heichal, that blood becomes pasul. Everyone agrees to that, both Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. So in that situation, says the Mishnah, if the blood was brought in, even a portion of that blood was brought into the heichal, the remaining blood that remains in the courtyard is pasul. So Rabbi Yossi Haglili machshir bechitza. Lifnim. Rabbi Yossi Haglili machshir bechitzon v'chachamim poslim. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says that the remaining blood that is in the courtyard is kosher, and the Chachamim say that it is pasul. So Amar Rabbi Yossi Haglili ma'im b'makam shamachshava poseles b'chutz lo asa esam meshuyar kiyotze makam sheina machshava poseles b'fnim eno din shelo nase esam meshuyar kenichnas. So Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, I don't understand your logic, Chachamim. Let me logically lay it out for you. When a person has a machshava of chutz l'makomo, where he says, I'm hereby shechting the animal in order to take some of this blood and bring it outside the temple. So that's called a machshava pisula, and it pasels the korban. If even just having a machshava of taking the blood outside will pasel the korban, and yet in the two vessel case, taking half the blood outside does not disqualify the blood that's left inside, then surely you should make the same logical argument by bringing the blood into the heichal. Because if I have a thought while I'm shechting the animal that I'm going to bring some of this blood inside, that does not disqualify the korban. So surely, in a two-vessel case, the bringing of the one vessel inside should not disqualify the vessel that remains in the courtyard. That's his kal v'chomer. So we'll address that shortly. Next case. Nichnas lechaper alfal pi shelo kiper pasel divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Next case. What if the blood of the chatas from this two-vessel case was brought inside the heichal, but it was not sprinkled? So Rabbi Eliezer says it's still pasel. And Reb Shimon Omer, ad sheyechaper. Reb Shimon says no, it's only pasel after it's sprinkled. It's pasel, and it pasels the blood that remains in the courtyard. Reb Yehuda Omer, im hich neshoge kasher. If the blood was brought in unintentionally into the heichal, so then that's a horse of a different color, and therefore the blood that remains in the courtyard will still be kosher. Now generically, the Mishnah says, Kol hadomim pesulim shenasno al gabi hamizbeach lo hirtza hatzitz ela al hatome. Shehatzitz meratza al hatome ve'inu meratza al hayotze. As a general rule, blood that has become tainted may not be placed on the mizbeach. But if a person does sprinkle it on the mizbeach, the question is the blood, does it work b'di'evet? Has the korban had its effect b'di'evet? So the Mishnah says, only if the blood was tummy. If the blood was tummy, we have a special principle that the forehead plate of the Kohen atones for tumah. And therefore, even though lechatchila you're not allowed to sprinkle blood that became tummy on the mizbeach, b'di'evet, if it was sprinkled, that korban is still kosher. But if it's tainted not because of tumah, but because of any other reason, let's say because it was taken outside the temple, or it was brought inside the heichal, in those situations, the tzitz will not atone for that, and therefore the korban has been ineffective, and you have to do it all over. The Gemara now says, let's elaborate on Rabbi Yossi Haglili's exchange with the Chachamim in the two-vessel case. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yossi Haglili kal v'chomer. U'ma b'makom shemachshava poseles b'chutz lo posel dam sheb'chutz shebifnim, makom shein machshava poseles b'fnim, ein odin shelo yifsol dam shebifnim es sheb'chutz. So this is just a repeat of what the Mishnah had said. We'll just speak it out one more time. What's Rabbi Yossi Haglili's logical argument? What's his kal v'chomer? He says like this. You want to argue that in the two-vessel case, when half the blood was taken outside, the remaining blood is kosher, but when half the blood was brought into the heichal, the remaining blood is pasel. I don't understand the logic. When I have a machshava of chutz l'makomo to take the blood outside, that pasels the whole korban. But when I have a machshava while I'm shechting to take the blood inside, that doesn't pasel the whole korban. So if my machshava were more machmir on my machshava on outside blood, outside the temple, then surely we should be, and yet we're still lenient when it comes to the two-vessel case when the blood is taken outside. Then surely we should be lenient, where we're lenient by machshava, we should be lenient in the two-vessel case, that if I take half the blood inside the heichal, the blood remaining in the courtyard should still be kosher. So Amrulo, Harehu Omer Asher Yuva Mi Dama, Afilo Mixas Dama. And the rabbis say, we're not concerned about your logic, we have a pasuk. The pasuk overrides logic. And the pasuk said that even if some of the blood, Mi Damas, from that letter Mem, even if some of the blood is brought inside the heichal from an outer blood chatas, that taints all of the blood. And so therefore it's based on a pasuk, it's not based on logic. So Amar Lehem Kal V'chomer Liyotze Me'ata. Uma b'makom shein machshava poseles b'fnim posel dam shebifnim es shebachutz. Makom shemachshava poseles b'chutz en odin sheyifsol dam shebachutz es shebifnim. So Rabbi Yossi Haglili retorts, and he says, well, if that's the case, that you have an explicit pasuk that tells you that in the two-vessel case, even a portion of the blood that's brought inside taints, inside the heichal, taints all the remaining blood, well then make a kal v'chomer. If we're lenient by machshava a machshava of chutz l'makomo inside the heichal, that it doesn't taint the korban, and yet we are machmir by the two-vessel case, then surely we should be machmir in the two-vessel case in a place where we're machmir by machshava of chutz l'makomo, which is outside the temple. So therefore, I'm switching the challenge, and I'm saying, if you're passing the blood in the two-vessel case when half of it is brought inside the heichal, then surely you should passel the blood when half the blood is taken outside the temple. So Amrulo Harehu Omer Asher Yuva Hanichnas Poisel Ve'ena Yotzei Posel. And then the Rabbanan respond and they say, here too it's based on a pasuk. The Torah, when it talks about the removal of blood outside the temple, it says Asher Yuva, Mida Asher Yuva, that if the blood is taken out, and it doesn't use the letter mem over there, or right, it says Asher Yuva if it's brought, right? So therefore, because of the verbiage of the pasuk where the mem is not utilized for blood that's taken outside, we see that only the blood that is taken outside the temple is tainted, and not the remaining blood in the other vessel. Now, then Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, okay, let me flip this upside down. Usehei machshava bifnim poseles mikal v'chomer. Uma b'makam shelo posel dam shebechutz shebifnim machshava poseles b'chutz. Makam sheposel dam shebifnim es dam shebachutz enu din shedei machshava poseles bifnim. So, okay, then let me turn it around and talk about machshava. We've established that a machshava of chutz l'makomo for outside the temple disqualifies the korban, but a machshava of chutz l'makomo inside the heichal does not disqualify the korban. Why should that be? Why should that be? Let me make a kal v'chomer. If you're so lenient by chutz l'makomo in the two-vessel case, you're lenient when it comes to outside the temple, and yet you're machmir when it comes to a machshav of chutz l'makomo for outside the temple. So then surely in a situation where you're machmir in the two-vessel case, you should be machshir, which is inside the heichal, you should be machshir a machshava of chutz l'makomo, of bringing the blood into the heichal. So why isn't taka the halacha that just like a machshav of chutz l'makomo outside the temple disqualifies, so too a machshav of chutz l'makomo for inside the heichal should disqualify as well? So what was the Chachamim's response? Harehu Omer Bayom Hashalishi Makom Shiyehi Meshulash Bidam Bibasar Be'emurim. Now this is really where it gets mind-blowing, and I'll need you to just bear with me for just a moment. There is a pasuk that talks about the prohibition of a machshava of chutz lizmano. The Torah says, V'im He'achol ye'achel bayom hashalishi pigulhu lo yeratzeh, which we had explained before refers to a machshava of chutz lizmana, which is called what we call pigul. However, there's extraneous verbiage, because the pasuk should have just said either bayom hashlishi or it should have said pigul. Why does it say both bayom hashlishi and pigul, which mean essentially the same thing, thinking about consuming the korban at the wrong time, past its expiration date? So the Gemara had said bayom hashlishi refers to chutz l'makomo, and pigul refers to chutz lizmana. Now there's a basic question. Why does the term bayom hashlishi refer to chutz l'makomo? In what sense does something that is purely a chronological term on the third day have to do with geography, have to do with a spatial disqualification? So the Gemara says it is in some way linked to spatiality. And in what way is it? Because bayom hashlishi refers to something that is tripled, or something that is in threes. And it really is referring to a space where all three components of the animal can be used in the worship of Hashem. Meaning, what three components are we talking about? The blood, the meat, and the intestines of the animal can be used in the service of Hashem. So that's the type of place where there's a disqualification of chutz l'makomo. When can the outside temple area be used in the worship of Hashem? At a time when there's no temple and bamos are permitted and private altars are permitted. On a private altar, historically, before the temple was built, it was permitted for you to bring an animal and to use its blood and its meat and its intestines and place them all on the altar. However, inside the heichal is a place where you cannot use all three components of the animal. You can only use blood, because only blood is acceptable to be used as a worship item of an animal inside the heichal. And that's how I know that when the Torah says chutz l'makomo is what is meant by the words bayom hashlishi, chutz l'makomo's prohibition of a machshava chutz l'makomo only applies to outside the temple and not inside the heichal. This is truly mind-blowing. It really goes to the outer limits of what is allowable in hermeneutics. So, like you said, Bob, it's based on a Mesorah. Anyway, so now the Gemara says, "V'lo tehei machshava poseles bachutz mikal v'chomer." So then Rabbi Yossi Aglili is persisting in his logical kal v'chomer arguments, and he says like this: "Uma makom sheposel dam shebifnim es shebachutz ein machshava poseles bifnim." He says like this: if you're looking, ma makom sheposel dam shebifnim es shebachutz, when I have blood that is supposed to be sprinkled on the in the courtyard, and ein machshava poseles bifnim, right? Sheposel dam shebifnim es shebachutz. If we're dealing with a place where makam shelo posel dam shebachutz or shebifnim, eino din shelo yehi posel machshava bachutz. So then switch it around. If then you're going to argue that then why is it that when I have a situation of where so then my argument is like this: if the laws of chutz l'makomo don't apply bifnim, so then why do the laws of the prohibited blood substance? In other words, why don't you say that if we're more lenient in the when it comes to blood being brought inside with the machshava, so then why don't you say that and yet we're still machmir when it comes to the two vessel case? Then why don't you say in a place where we're lenient by the two vessel case, which is outside, a machshava chutz l'makomo should surely not be a disqualification. So therefore, Talmud lomar shlishi chutz lizmano pigul chutz l'makomo. So therefore, that's why you have a pasuk. The Torah says explicitly to address the halacha of chutz l'makomo, that it applies to outside the temple. That's what the pasuk says. Bayom hashlishi. It's referring to a place where all three components of the animal can be offered in a time of bamos, and that's how I know that the laws of chutz l'makomo apply to outside the temple. Now, the next Gemara's question is a generic question, not related to the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Haglili and the Chachamim. And it deals with the following issue, which is, up until now we've been talking about blood, now let's talk about the flesh, the meat of the animal. Basar hayotze l'chutz pasel, hanichnas lifnim kosher. If meat of an animal that is supposed to be consumed in the courtyard goes outside the temple, that meat becomes pasel. But if the meat of a korban chatas, let's say, that's supposed to be eaten in the courtyard is brought inside the heichal, that meat is still kosher. Sheyehi bedin. You might have argued logically that meat that enters into the heichal should become pasel, just like blood. Uma b'makom shelo pasel dam shebachutz shebifnim basar hayotze l'chutz pasel makom shepasel dam shebifnim shebachutz basar nichnas bifnim neino din shepasel. Because after all, we're more machmir on the two vessel case when it's inside the heichal versus outside the temple. So if we're lenient in the two vessel case outside the temple, and yet we're still machmir when it comes to basar being taken outside, then surely where we're machmir in the two vessel case, which is inside the heichal, we should surely be machmir in the case of blood being brought inside. So therefore, harehu omer mi dama velo basar. So therefore the Torah says no. Only when blood is brought from a chatas inside the heichal does that blood become contaminated and contaminate the whole carbon. But only blood and not other components of the animal such as its meat. So, but let me make another kal v'chomer. Me'ata. Uma b'makom shepasal dam shebifnim es shebachutz basar hanichnas lifnim kosher. Makom shelo pasal dam shebachutz shebifnim basar hayotze l'chutz eino din shekosher. Well, then turn the kal v'chomer around and make the following logical argument. Why then should meat that goes outside the temple be pasel? If we're lenient on meat that goes into the heichal to say that it's still kosher, even though we're machmir in the two vessel case, then surely when we're in a place where we're makel in the two-vessel case, we should be makel by the basar that goes outside. So harehu omer uvasar basadeh tereifa lo sochelu keven shiyatza basar chutz l'mechisaso ne'esar. So here's another mind-blowing hermeneutic, which states as follows. The Torah says, uvasar basadeh tereifa lo sochelu. Very straightforward pasuk. How would you translate that pasuk? That if meat is found from an animal that is mauled by another animal, that meat that is found in the field may not be eaten. Comes along Chazal and they say something truly mind-blowing. They say that's the simple interpretation of the pasuk. But why does the Torah say the word basadeh, that you find the meat in the field? Any animal that's mauled, its meat is not kosher, its meat is treifa. Why say dafka basadeh? It's to tell you a secondary halacha, that any time you find meat that is confined by some kind of perimeter, that it can only be eaten in a perimeter, when that meat is outside its normal perimeters, that meat has the din of treifa and it cannot be eaten. That's what it means. And it's referring to kudshim, that may only be eaten inside the walls of the temple. If it's out basada, outside the temple, it has the din of treifa and it cannot be eaten. And that's how I know that meat that's brought outside, despite your kal v'chomer, is possible.
This applies with any meat that's left, the eyes left, I'm seeing it becomes treifa.
No, that's a separate din of basar shenis'alei min ha'ayin. That's a rabbinic law. That's not a deoraisa. But it's a similar law, but it's only derabanan. Tana rabbanan, penima. Ein li ela penima, heichel minayin tamolomer el hakodesh. Penima. V'yomar. So now we get to another technical law. The Torah says that, going back to that case of where Nadav and Avihu have just died, and Moshe turns to Elazar, Isamar, and their father Aaron, and he says, Hein lohuva estama min dama el hakodesh penima. Right? The blood was not brought inside to the Kodesh inside. Why does the Torah have to say the word El HaKodesh Penima? Two terms, Kodesh and Penima. Why are both terms necessary?
Yeah, one's the same.
One, Kodesh or Penima. Say either one. They both mean the same thing. One means the holy and one means inside. So the answer is, says the Brisa, because if I only had one, I would think that one means the Heichal, but I wouldn't necessarily know. Maybe it means to bring it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that if the blood was brought all the way into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it's pasul, but not if it's brought just into the Heichal, into the outer part of the covered portion, before you get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. How do you know that it's both the Kodesh HaKadoshim and to the Heichal? So that's why the Torah has to say El HaKodesh Penima. V'yomar Kodesh v'al yomar Penima. Why can't the Torah just say Hein lo huva esdama min dama el hakodesh, and then it will imply the kodesh hakadoshim, and you don't have to say the word penima. So Amar Rava bazev limit al zeh mida dahava atosha v'sachir. So Rava says because both the term kodesh and the word penima are ambiguous, and you need one to reflect and to help explain the other. And this is very similar to the case of toshav and sachir in the pasuk referring to a kohen's slaves. The Torah says that there are certain times when if a Kohen owns an Eved Kanani, who is the material possession of the Kohen, that Eved Kanani may eat the holy tithes of the Truma of a Kohen. However, if a person is a Jew, and he is just an indentured servant, if he's an Eved Ivri of a Kohen, he's not allowed to. And how do I know that? The Pasuk says, V'chol zar lo yochal kodesh, toshav kohen v'sachir lo yochal kodesh. The Torah uses both the word toshav, and it uses the word sachir, referring to a Jew who is indentured to a Kohen, may not eat the Kohen's holy items. The Tanya, Toshav zeh kanui kinyan olam, sachir zeh kanui kinyan shanim. The word Toshav refers to an Eved Ivri who was indentured for up to 50 years until the Yovel, because he's gotten his ear pierced. And the word Sachir refers to an Eved Ivri who has to work up to 7 years, but then goes free on the 7th year. So Yomar Toshav al Yomar Sachir vani Omer kanui kinyan olamenu oichel kanui kinyan shanam lo kol shekeh. So the Brisa says, why don't you just say the word Toshav in the pasuk? And if I know that a fully indentured servant cannot eat the Kohen's kachim, then certainly only a partially indentured servant cannot eat the Kohen's kachim. So ilu kein hayisi omer toishav zekonu kinyan shanma valkonu kinyan olam yehi ochel. V'asachir v'limet al toshav shezekonu kinyan olam v'zekonu kinyan shonim ve'eno ochel. So the Gemara, the Brisa answers because both the word toshav and sachir are ambiguous. If the Torah had only used the word toshav, I might have interpreted it to mean only someone who's indentured for 7 years does not eat the Kohen's kachim, but someone who's indentured for 50 years does eat the Kohen's kachim. And therefore you need the word both toshav and sachir to tell you that both kinds of indentured Jewish servant do not eat the Kohen's kachim. And the same thing, says Rava, is going on over here. The word kodesh and the word penima are both ambiguous. If only one of those terms was used, I might have thought that it only means that if the blood is brought all the way into the kodesh HaKadoshim, it passels the carbon. But if the blood is only brought into the heichel, it does not. And therefore I need both words to tell you that both bringing it into the kodesh HaKadoshim and bringing it into the heichel will taint it. So Amrle Abaye, Bishlam Ahasam Tre Gufe Ninu, Va'aflagav Dahavale Lekra Lemichtav Nirtza Lo Yochal, V'idach Asi Bekal V'chomer, Milsa Dasi Bekal V'chomer Tarch V'kasav Lakra. Elahacha Kaven De Ifsal Behechal Lifnai V'lifnim, my boy. So Abaye asks a detailed question, which I'll explain for simplicity as follows. Abaye says the analogy is not an apt analogy. In the case of the indentured servant, there are two types of indentured servant. And I know that, therefore, you need to have two words. Now, the Torah could have just specified and said a nirtza, a person who has his ear pierced, which is clearly referring to a fully indentured servant, does not eat the kachim. And I would know from a kal v'chomer that if an fully indentured servant doesn't eat, then surely a partially indentured servant doesn't eat. But sometimes the Torah will write ambiguous terminology, and something that could have been derived from a precise word, and the Torah will use two imprecise words because sometimes the Torah does that. Something that you could have inferred just from logic, the Torah will write explicitly. So that I understand, because we're talking about two different, discrete, separate kinds of people. A fully indentured servant and a partially indentured servant. That makes sense. But over here, we're talking about blood that may not be brought into the entire heichal. Now, the Torah didn't need to have two separate terms, Kodesh and Penima. It's all the Heichal. It's all one building. So why is it necessary for the Torah to say two ambiguous terms when one specific term would have sufficed? Just right, don't bring the blood into the Kodesh, or bring the blood into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And since the only way to access the Kodesh HaKadoshim, don't bring the blood into the Heichel, the Torah could have said. The only way to access the Kodesh HaKadoshim is through the Heichel. Once the Torah says don't bring the blood into the Heichel, it automatically subsumes the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So why did the Torah have to write two ambiguous terms when one ambiguous term would have sufficed for one structure? For one structure. You're not talking about two separate, different kinds of people. You're talking about one structure.
But the Hema Tumayo says, the Torah says...
I know exactly what you're referring to, Mr. Friedman, that sometimes the Torah will add verbiage to speak Balashonaki, but that's it's a good sushtel. But here, the argument that Abaya is making is, he's saying, you can't make the analogy from when the Torah is ambiguous when it talks about Toshav and Sachar. Those are two different people. Here we're talking about one building. Just say, don't bring it into the Heichel. And obviously I'll know that part of the Heichel is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So it's not an apt analogy. So the rather says, Ela Omer Abaya lo nitzracha ela lederach mishupash. So rather, what's the real reason why the Torah used two terms when one term would have sufficed? It's to tell you that not only may you not bring the blood in from the front door, you may not bring the blood in from a back door or a window into the Heichel. Any blood that's brought into the Heichel, whether it's from the front door, or whether it's from the back door or a back window, will passel the carbon. Amalei Rava v'ha hava aksiv bei. Rava says that doesn't help. The Torah says hein lo huva esdama. The blood was not brought in. Hava implies a normative bringing in through the front door. So if anything, the pasuk seems to say the exact opposite of what you're suggesting, that if it's brought in an abnormal way, the blood does not taint the carbon. Ela amar Rava kol midi dechashiv alei lifnai v'lifnim lo mifsal behechel. So rather, says Rava, what is the pasuk coming to tell you? It's going to tell you an additional halacha. Normally, when blood is brought into the heichal, the blood becomes pasul and it pasels the carbon. But that's only if you intended to bring it into the Heichal. But if you intended to bring the blood into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and you only made it into the Heichal and then you brought it out, the korban does not become pasul thereby. And that's what the additional word of the pasuk is coming to tell you. El HaKodesh, you bring it into the Heichal intentionally, so then you pasul the korban. But if you meant to bring it into the Penima, if you meant to bring it all the way into the inner sanctum and you didn't make it there, so then bringing the blood into the Heichal does not pasul it. Boy, you just got to finish the Gemara. This will go quickly. Boy Rava, par helam davar shel tzibor, v'seir avodas cholchavim shechnes damim lifnai v'lifnim mahu. So, an interesting shaila. What happens if I have a korban that is meant for the inner altar, for inside the heichal? So the blood is supposed to go on the inner altars, like a par helam davar, a communal sacrifice for wrongdoing. And what I end up doing is I bring the blood not only into the heichal, but I bring it all the way into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Is that now the same psul as bringing outer blood into the heichal? Mi amrinan el hakodesh penima kol heicha de karinan el hakodesh karinan le penima kol heicha de lo karinan el hakodesh lo karinan penima o dilma shlo b'mekomanu. On the one hand, you could argue that this blood was meant to be brought into the heichal, and so therefore there's no violation of bringing it any further in, because the only time that the blood is tainted is if it was not meant to be brought into the heichal. But if it was meant to be brought into the heichal, it cannot become tainted by bringing it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Or perhaps this is shelo b'makomo. And shelo b'makomo applies whether it's supposed to be on the courtyard and I bring it into the heichal, or whether it's supposed to be in the heichal and I bring it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Next question. The imtim salomer shelo b'makomanu, and if you're going to argue the latter, that it's tainted, so par v'sor shel yom ha'kippurim shehiza midaman al habadim v'hotzian laheichal v'hichnisan mahu mi amrinan mikomon hu odil mahol v'nofak nofak. Next question. What about the blood that's supposed to be brought on Yom Kippur into the Holy of Holies, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? And the Kohen brought the blood into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, sprinkled the blood between the staves of the ark, and then walked outside. Then he turns around and walks back in with this blood into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Has that blood now become disqualified and tainted? Because after all, it's shelo b'makomo, because I've already finished the blood work on the Kodesh HaKadoshim. I'm not supposed to go back inside. Or can you argue that no, it's only called shelo b'makomo if it was never supposed to go into that place. But if it was allowed into that place and then was taken out and brought back in, maybe it's still okay. And v'imtim salomer hol v'nafak nafak, and if you're going to tell me that it is disqualified because once I finish I'm not allowed to go back in, so he's a midaman ala paroches v'hotzion lamizbeach v'hichnisan mahu hachavada echad makom hu al dilma yitzia karina bay. Now here's my next question. If you're going to tell me that in that situation, blood that was sprinkled in the Holy of Holies and then taken out and then brought back in is now tainted and disqualified, let me ask you another question. What happens if it's on Yom Kippur, I'm the Kohen Gadol, and I'm supposed to be taking this blood, eventually working my way from the outside and bringing it into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So I work my way, walk into the Heichel, walk past the inner altar, walk up to the paroches, the curtain, and I sprinkle 7 times on the paroches as is prescribed by the Torah. The next thing I'm supposed to do is walk through the paroches and sprinkle between the staves of the ark. But instead of doing that, I turn around and I walk back to the inner altar. And then I turn around and walk into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now, could you argue that because I've walked backwards, I've gone chutz l'mekomo? Or would you argue that since I'm still within the confines of the Heichal, I have done nothing wrong and that blood is not disqualified? So in all of those questions, the Gemara says, Teku, let it sit. And I'm sorry it took us so long today. Have a great day.